Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Jaya Jaya Shri Chaitanya Jaya Nityananda. Jaya Dvaita Chandra Jaya Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. It is appropriate that today we read from Sri Caitanya Caritramrita. I've chosen a verse from Madhya Lila chapter 13, the Lord's dancing at Ratha Yatra, verse number 119. E matta gaura shame don't he tela teli. E matta gaura shame don't he tela teli. Svarate shamere rakke gaura mahabali. Svarate shamere rakke gaura mahabali. E matta. In this way. Gaura shame. Lord Jagannath and Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Don't he, between both of them. Tela teli, competition of pushing forward. Svarate, in his own car. Shamere, Lord Jagannath. Rake, keeps. Gaurang, Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Mahabali, greatly powerful. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada Ki. Translation. Thus there was a sort of competition between Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and Lord Jagannath in seeing who would lead. But Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was so strong that he made Lord Jagannath wait in his car. Purport. In his Anubhashya, Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur describes the ecstasy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as follows. After giving up the company of the gopis in Vrindavan, Sri Krishna, the son of Maharaj Nanda, engaged in his pastimes at Dwaraka. When Krishna went to Kurukshetra with his brother and sister and others from Dwaraka, he again met the inhabitants of Vrindavan. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Radha Bhava Duti Suvalita. That is, Krishna himself assuming the part of Srimati Radharani in order to understand Krishna. Lord Jagannath Deva is Krishna, and Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is Srimati Radharani. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's leading Lord Jagannath toward the Gundicha temple corresponded to Srimati Radharani's leading Krishna toward Vrindavan. Sri Kshetra Jagannath Puri was taken as the kingdom of Dwaraka, the place where Krishna enjoys supreme opulence. But he was being led by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to Vrindavan, the simple village where all the inhabitants are filled with ecstatic love for Krishna. Sri Kshetra is a place of Aishvarya Lila, just as Vrindavan is the place of Madhurya Lila. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's following at the rear of the Ratha indicated that Lord Jagannath, Krishna, was forgetting the inhabitants of Vrindavan. Although Krishna neglected the inhabitants of Vrindavan, he could not forget them. Thus, in his opulent Ratha Yatra, he was returning to Vrindavan. In the role of Srimati Radharani, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was examining whether the Lord still remembered the inhabitants of Vrindavan. When Chaitanya Mahaprabhu fell behind the Ratha car, Jagannath Dev, Krishna himself, understood the mind of Srimati Radharani. Therefore, Jagannath sometimes fell behind the dancing of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to indicate to Srimati Radharani that he had not forgotten. Thus, Lord Jagannath would stop the forward march of the Ratha and wait at a standstill. In this way, Lord Jagannath agreed that without the ecstasy of Srimati Radharani, he could not feel satisfied. While Jagannath was thus waiting, Gaurasundara Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in his ecstasy of Srimati Radharani, immediately came forward to Krishna. At such times, Lord Jagannath would proceed ahead very slowly. These competitive exchanges were all part of the love affair between Krishna and Srimati Radharani. In that competition between Lord Chaitanya's ecstasy for Jagannath and Jagannath's ecstasy for Srimati Radharani, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu emerged successful. And so ends Srila Prabhupada's purport to this verse, E matta gaur ashame dohe tela teli swarate shamere rake gaura mahabali. This verse is within a section of Caitanya Caritramrita, which I consider as one of the most dramatic moments in the work. Caitanya Caritamrita is the Amrita of the Charita, the activities of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And there is so much nectar, so much Amrita, that one cannot begin. Even Krishnadas Kaviraj himself, in writing the Caitanya Caritamrita, says, how can I possibly begin to describe the glories of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in this work? There's a lot of drama in Caitanya Caritamrita, and much of this drama has to do with the fact that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in one sense, has a double identity. It's actually even more complicated than that. He has, you may say, a triple identity. The double identity is, on the one side, he is Krishna himself, and he has expressed prior to appearing in the world his resolve to appear in the world for a special purpose, but that purpose cannot be realized as Krishna. As one devotee has put it, I think very in an interesting way, he says, God has a problem. What? God has a problem? Yes, and the problem is somewhat similar to a problem that we have. What is that problem? The problem is that God has no love for God. And when he sees the love of God, the love of himself, of Krishna, demonstrated, shown by Srimati Radharani, he is amazed, he's overwhelmed. And he admits in the Bhagavatam, I cannot reciprocate your love. Na parayeham niravadya samyujam svasada kritya vibhudayu. Even for the time of Brahma, if given that time, I would not be able to reciprocate properly your love for me. So what to do, the Lord decides. And when the Lord decides something, it's going to happen. We decide so many things, but what happens to our decisions? Much of the time, Krishna simply laughs. But when Krishna decides something, it's going to happen. So he decides to appear in the world in the mood of Srimati Radharani, more broadly speaking, in the mood of Krishna's devotee. So this is the double identity on the one side, that he is the Lord and he is the Lord's devotee. And this causes problems sometimes in the course of Mahaprabhu's life, when the devotees want to praise him as the Supreme Personality of Godhead. What does he do? He closes his ears. Don't say such things. This is madness. Because his mood is that he is the devotee of Krishna. But it gets more complicated than this. Krishna, in the mood of a devotee, appears as Radha. And so, as Srimati Radharani appearing, he is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he is simultaneously Krishna. So he is Radha and Krishna, right? Shri Chaitanya, how does it go? Shri Chaitanya Radha Krishna Nahe Anya, he is none other than Radha and Krishna. So it's a little complicated. And one way this is expressed by Krishnadas Kaviraj is that Mahaprabhu has an internal purpose and an external purpose. We might say this in a slightly different way. He has an inward directed purpose and he has an outward directed purpose. And the reason I've chosen this particular verse as a starting point that we reflect on the wonderful identity and the ways of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is here we have a description of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in the mood of Radha. He is absorbed in his inner directed mood, and he is relating with Lord Jagannath as Krishna. And where is all of this happening? It's happening in the most public situation imaginable. So it's a very private thing, but it's happening completely in public. So two things are going on simultaneously, and only a few of the devotees know what's really going on. so to say, what's going on internally with Mahaprabhu. But I wanted, rather than to elaborate on this internal relation of Mahaprabhu, I want to attempt to share with you one way of appreciating some features of Caitanya Caritramrita which you may not have been aware of in quite this way. And for this, we prepared one slide. But first, I want to ask you, how many of you have read the entire Caitanya Caritamrita? How many of you have read Caitanya Caritamrita? Okay. How many of you have started reading Caitanya Caritamrita? Okay. Those of you who have not started reading Caitanya Caritamrita yet, I would humbly suggest that you start today. Today is the best day to begin this project of reading this wonderful work. Those of you who have not yet started, would you agree that this is a good day for starting to read? Yes? Are you going to do it? Yes? No? Maybe? That was a sort of a mild yes. Yes? Yes! Ah. Now, today is a fasting day, which gives you more time to read. It's not that you take excuse, I cannot read, I am too weak to read because I'm fasting. So today, and those of you who have been reading Caitanya Caritamrita, today is a good day to finish reading. Well, at least it's a good day to continue reading, okay? And those of you who have already read all Caitanya Caritamrita, don't think you're off the hook. Today is a wonderful day to begin again. What do you think? Haribol. Hare Krishna. Okay, now, please bear with me. I know this is going to be a little bit on the analytical side, and you may think, we don't want to be analytical on this day. We just want Amrita. Well, my apologies in advance. We're going to be a little analytical. And I hope you'll find this helpful in your reading of Caitanya Caritamrita. Okay, let's go to the next. All right, well, it didn't come out in quite the same proportion. And I know it's a bit small for you to read. So in any case, it's quite opaque. It's not very clear what's going on here. So I'm going to try to explain in the next few minutes what I'm trying to show here. What you see looks like some sort of a target. It's so many concentric circles. So what I'm doing in this chart is giving one idea, and this is not the only way we could do it, of the different sorts of persons that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu meets and how he relates with them in Caitanya Caritamrita. These are categories of persons that Mahaprabhu meets, and he has different pastimes with them. But in all cases, we can say this has to do with his outreach, with his outward directed activities. Now, it's all about the outward activities, the outward directed attention. but it begins in the center, where the center, this yellow circle, is representative of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his immediate associates, his intimate associates. So we can know, especially the Panchatattva will be located, so to say, within this center. And so many devotees who are referred to in Caitanya Caritramrita would be included within this central circle. But we know that Mahaprabhu is encountering persons who are not identifying themselves, at least not in the beginning, as followers of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And so here I've made this set of sort of categories which come in this form as concentric circles, indicating closer and further away from Mahaprabhu and, Gaudiya Vaishnavism. Okay? And so the immediate concentric circle, it's sort of a pink-purple color just outside, is representing other Vaishnava communities, other Vaishnava traditions. We see, for example, when Chaitanya Mahaprabhu travels to South India, he meets with, and actually he stays with, for the entire 4 months of Chaturmas, the rainy season, he stays at Sri Rangam. So we all, or most of us may know that the Sri Rangam temple is a kind of headquarters of the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya. And the head priest of the Sri of this temple at that time, what was his name? Who remembers? Yes, Venkadabhatta. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu stayed with his family for this time. And Krishnadas Kaviraj describes the friendly and indeed joking exchanges that they had while he was staying there. These are very sweet exchanges, and at the same time, Mahaprabhu is saying, your understanding of things is somewhat not complete. Your Lakshmi Devi, who is very much worshipped in the Sri Vaishnava tradition, therefore it's called Sri Vaishnavism, she wants to come to Vrindavan to experience the rasa dance. So what do you say to that? Huh? So in this way, he was joking. And there are other representatives of other sampradayas referred to in Caitanya Caritamrita that Mahaprabhu encounters. One of them you may not be aware, you know of perhaps Keshava Kashmiri, yes? Keshava Kashmiri, it turns out, was a prominent person of the Nimbarka Sampradaya. And so Mahaprabhu's meeting with him and, humbling him is a description of an encounter with one of these 4 sampradayas, in effect. So I won't we can do a whole seminar on this chart. We can discuss for quite some time, but I'm just giving a little sketch, considering our short time. Then, going to the next concentric circle, which here is referred to as other Brahminical traditions, is indicating other pastimes, and specifically it refers to Mahaprabhu's encounter, for example, with Prakashananda Saraswati. whom he met where? In Varanasi. And we know that Prakashananda Saraswati was of the Advaita Vedanta Sampradaya, beginning with Shankaracharya. And that meeting was very significant because Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Krishnadas Kaviraj tells us, was able to change his heart and to inspire him to take up the chanting of the holy name Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Yes. And then there are other persons we could refer to in this category, so to say, but I want to move on to the next category. And this category includes actually 3 different groups, but they're all in one category, which have the common reference Pashandi, according to Krishnadas Kaviraj. There are Shaktas, there are Buddhists, and there are tribals, what you call Adivasi. Each one of these are referred to in Caitanya Caritramrita of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu meeting with representatives, you can say, of these different groups. So Buddhists, again, in South India, there's a somewhat humorous episode when Krishnadas tells us, and Krishnadas wouldn't have been there personally, but he must have heard about it from Raghunath Das Goswami, who would have heard about it from others, that some small group of Buddhists with their guru decided to, they wanted to attempt to embarrass Mahaprabhu. And how would they do this? They would trick him into accepting food which is untouchable. And so they brought this large plate of various food, unmentionable and untouchable foods for Mahaprabhu to take. The idea being that it would be proper etiquette for him to accept this offering. To, we may say, help him to avoid such an embarrassment, what happens? Mahaprabhu gets help from a crow. A bird comes swooping down and grabs the plate out of this Buddhist hand, lifts it up, and drops the content with the plate on top of the head Buddhist. Boom! And he falls to the ground, and that's the end of that practical so-called joke. So in this way, the encounter with Buddhism is briefly mentioned in the Caitanya Caritamrita. The reference to tribals comes in a wonderful pastime. Mahaprabhu is on his way to Vrindavan. And of course, in one sense, we can say the whole Caitanya Caritamrita is about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu either wanting to go to Vrindavan, or going to Vrindavan, or being prevented from going to Vrindavan, or finally arriving in Vrindavan, or being asked by his servant, Balabhadra Bhattacharya, Mahaprabhu, could we please leave Vrindavan now? This was after only 2 months they were there. And his servant, his personal servant, is saying, Guru Maharaj, could we please leave Vrindavan? Why would he want him to leave Vrindavan? Too much ecstasy. so much ecstasy that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's life was in danger. Why? Because he would dive into the Yamuna River. It had become a daily activity, not just to take a swim, but in his absorption, there was a danger that he would drown. And so Balabhadra had to go and save him again and again. And he was getting tired of this. This is too much. So he said, Mahaprabhu, please, can we just leave Vrindavan? It's too much ecstasy. And he said, all right, if you insist. Because he wanted to please his devotee. Before he arrived in Vrindavan, on his way, he, as many of you know, he went through one jungle, Jarikanda. And in Jarikanda, he met with the forest animals. And what happened with the forest animals? Wonderful things happened. We may come back to that in a moment. After meeting the forest animals, he met some tribals from the Bila tribe. And he inspired them. He inspired them to do what? To chant. To chant what? Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And so he continued on and he eventually arrived in Vrindavan. The next category, which is in a sense further distant from the center of Mahaprabhu and his associates. I have to say, in a sense, because we're not making absolute categories here, are the Muslims. And there are several references in Caitanya Caritramrita of Mahaprabhu encountering Shanti, 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 Shanti. Your punishment is you have to purchase a set of Caitanya Caritamrita today. Okay. So there are several references to Mahaprabhu's encounter with Muslims of various status and so on. The story which Srila Prabhupada seems to have liked to recount the most was about how his followers, Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Sanatana Goswami, left their service to the Muslim king of Bengal in order to join him. And in their great humility, the Goswamis, Rupa and Sanatan, when they lived in Jagannath Puri, kept their distance from the Jagannath temple because they felt themselves to be so fallen, having been associated, having worked for, having been intimately interacting with the king and his associates, who were all Muslim. But then, of course, we have similar situation with Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur. Namacharya Srila Haridas Thakur ki, which has this wonderful description of his many encounters with Haridas Thakur, culminating in when Haridas Thakur departs the world. Such a touching pastime this is, which demonstrates above all Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's deep appreciation, deep acceptance of Haridas Thakur as his very own, to the point that he lifted his body, the body of Haridas Thakur, and danced with the body. No, in normal society of that time and that place, There were two reasons he would not be expected to touch the body. Number one, it was a dead body. It was a corpse from the mundane perspective. And he was considered Muslim. Considered untouchable. What did Mahaprabhu do? He embraced him. He lifted him. He danced with him. Such an amazing pastime. So in all of these categories of personalities we see in the chart, there are these thin lines connecting to identify the categories, but then there are these arrows, and the arrows are indicating Chaitanya Mahaprabhu is going out, he is reaching, he is touching all of these different sorts of persons, social categories, you may say, philosophical categories, and so on. There's one final category on the outer edge that I've identified here. And this consists of, what did I put here? 4 different groups. Animals, plants, objects, and substances. Now, again, with animals, we can refer to the Jarikanda pastime, in which the Lord inspired all the animals not only to chant the holy name, but also to embrace each other. Tigers embracing deer, and Krishnadas tells us, not only embracing, but kissing. So, and then he comes to Vrindavan, and he comes to Govardhan, and Govardhan, what is Govardhan? It is stone. And what is Mahaprabhu doing when he comes to Govardhan Hill? He's embracing the stone, and the stones are melting from his tears. These interactions in Puri, he is running over the sand dunes because he's thinking this is Govardhan. He's diving into the ocean because he's thinking it's Yamuna. So his interactions with animals, with plants also, trees and birds, and objects, physical objects, it turns out he has his most intensive ecstatic emotions in relation to animate and inanimate, we may use the word objects. All of these connections he's making, bringing us, as we read Caitanya Caritramrita, into the center. He is allowing us, he's opening up the possibility to associate with him, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as the Panchatattva are associating. What do the Panchatattva do? According to Krishnadas in 7th chapter, 8th chapter of Adi Leela, how do they spend their time? They become plunderers. You know the word plunder? Hindi mein, plunder? Huh? I'm getting about 10 different words for plunder. Huh? Thief. Yes, a plunderer is a thief, and a thief is a chore. Huh? Yeah. But plundering is a little more than theft. What is plunder? Plunder is taking everything, right? I mean, a thief might just grab a few jewels and run, but a plunderer takes everything. So what's a plunderer? Lutera. Yes, lute. Yes, so Panchatattva, they are doing this only. They are plundering so that nothing is left. Nothing is left. First of all, what are they plundering? Where are they plundering? The storehouse of Krishna Prema. There's a storehouse, which is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, we can say. And they are plundering that storehouse, and they are distributing the goods. They're very generous. They're not keeping it for themselves. They're distributing it. Who are they distributing it to? To everyone. Everyone. Not considering who is qualified, who is not qualified. Because if we consider who is qualified in this age of Kali, no one is qualified. We're not qualified. So they're distributing to and what happens to this storehouse of love? Krishna Prema, what happens? Is it emptied out? So sorry, no more. It's finished. Have to make new order. Next yuga. No, it keeps filling up, it keeps filling up, so they keep plundering. And that plundering is giving us all opportunity, and that opportunity is to join in the plundering. If you had a secret desire to be a thief, you can now engage it in devotional service. Hare Krishna. So Panchatattvatmakam Krishnam Bhakta Rupa Sarupakam Bhaktavadaram Bhaktakyam Namami Bhakta Shaktikam. And Sri Krishna Chaitanya, Prabhu Nityananda, Sri Advaita, Sri Gadadhar, Srivas Adi Gaur Bhaktavinda. Srivas Adi Srivas Adi Srivas Adi Hare Krishna. So Gaur Bhaktavinda, we are invited to participate and to come thereby into the center of this analytical analysis, so to say. But to do this, of course, we follow Mahaprabhu's instructions, and to do this best, we read Caitanya Caritramrita. So I'm hoping that, Krishna willing, I may be able to come here toward the end of this year or beginning next year, and I hope that when I ask, have you all read the Caitanya Caritamrita beginning to end, that you will all be able to say, yes, we have done our homework. Yes, is that okay? No? Yes? No? Maybe. It all depends, coronavirus and, there's so many problems. Huh? Okay. So I will stop there. Thank you all very much. There is something. Is Gauranga Prabhu here? You're here. Okay. Grantaraj Shri Caitanya Caritamrita ki, Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki, Gaur Premanande, Hare Krishna.